We're incredibly privileged to have with us today Hernando de Soto, who is a Peruvian economist and who is the pioneer of the process of unlocking wealth in the hands of the poor. I've been talking to Hernando about the kind of challenges that we in South Africa are facing, the enormous challenges of inequality, the challenge of unemployment, the need for land reform, which is included in our constitution, but the very positive fact that we have 9.5 million households, previously disadvantaged people who own their own homes, and that these homes have a combined value of anywhere between 1.5 and 1.8 trillion rand, which is 2 or 3 times the value of all of the agricultural land in the country. So what I really want to do is learn from Hernando de Soto about his experience in dealing with these problems, not only in Peru, but around the world. Hernando, can you give us a few tips of where we go from here?
Sure, I'll give you tips. It won't be big advice, it'll be tips on the basis of work we've done elsewhere, not in South Africa, trying to face issues. The first thing is that when we started our reforms, we built a system of popular feedback, which means that we knew that making any reform that's worthwhile is going to be polarizing. There will be one side that wants to do everything, wants government to take over everything, wants to collectivize, and of course wants to expropriate it, the simplest thing. And the other ones who say, well, of course we've got to do reforms, but if we do, but these reforms could affect our credibility. Who's going to invest? Who's going to create capital around an insecure situation? That doesn't happen. So we found that the stabilizing factor was, how do you get people's opinion? And we established a system of popular consultations, systematic, that actually went to the World Bank afterwards. I think we got $240 million for it. It was the flagship of the bank for many years. I think they're going to reinstitute it again, which was called Doing Business. And the idea is that whatever reform you want to make, you want one way or another to find out from the bottom every time that you make a proposal what people think about it. Get the complaints. And there's no agenda. You just simply get the complaints. And then you'll find out that a lot of the information that is necessary to find what is reasonable, what has to do, you'll actually get from the people directly themselves. And the way it works is television. We had the biggest channel on of the state, where people were allowed, and we were told, okay, the problem is land reform, the problem is property, the problem is this, whatever the issues are, let us know what the problem is. And so you start getting information of what's really happening on the ground. And that goes not directly to us. It goes through the press editorializes it, and so you start putting faces and real problems in front, so that when you get to the point that you decide whether you're going left or you're going right, the reply is never it's left or right. It's somewhere that's reasonable. And I would sit there with the president of Peru, 4 hours. We had the highest ratings on television, just going through the different complaints. The complaints also meant that we had the right to take people in tribes, in communities, and people in the state that was a second level, to also be able to manifest themselves regarding the problem so that we could see what all the options really were. And then whatever reform took place afterwards was a reform that was done on the basis of some kind of touch with a social contract. In other words, I'm not giving you a first direct reply of what you should do, but what I'm telling you is that whatever we did, we made sure that we were in tune with an evolving social contract and that everybody got into the game directly, aside from the contention of political parties, just simply make sure that we had all the right information. So I think that was a very important part of our. That was a very important part of the exercise. An important from that exercise came, for example, the fact of what were the rules of the game in what I think you would call the townships, in the slum areas. What were the rules of the game in tribally dominated areas? What were the rules of the game where everybody had mining claims, but nobody dared go in because there was violence or whatever it is? What are the rules? What is it that works? And on the basis of that, try and concoct everything. Because the tendency, of course, always is those people that were, in our case, were trained in Maoist China or were trained in Patrice Lumumba University in Russia, or, I don't know, were trained in Stanford University, came with different ideas. So the debate that was produced in the West took place also in the South when there were other and very different options. The idea, and also what it allowed us especially is to address the issues in terms of the interest and the language that were understood by the people who were the majority of the voters. And that was, of course, very, very important. You know, we didn't ask questions because we didn't bring in psychologists and say, what do you think is property? They would come up and say what they thought property was. And from then on, you were able to structure the languages. So the first thing is to get very, very close to the people who will finally, because they take to the streets or because they vote, will make the decisions. And that set a climate, if you want to, for getting together, getting the information. It's not all there, Dave. We thought that there were no titles, for example, in many places, and there are titles. It's just that it happened under an administration. The place got disorganized. They weren't there. There are maps, all right? There is a way of settling claims. And the idea is bring all that forward so that whatever you do, you pick up what's really being exercised at the ground, and you get rid of lots of prejudices. It's an incredible amount of prejudices that do exist, and you find out that, for example, in our case, a lot of tribal chiefs of people from the Amazon, right, or tribal chiefs of people of the Andes, which is different, understood perfectly well what the do's and don'ts were. They just didn't have a channel through which to express it. And at the end, everybody wants a wealthy country, wants an organized country, and therefore, by having public consultations that allow individuals, a citizen as such, to express oneself, you put a sort of, you don't have the traditional 800-pound gorillas. You had 800 gorillas, each of them saying things independently, and you were talking to individuals as opposed to organizations.
And what was the spin-off of this? This sounds like a really fascinating process, a consultation. Were you able to unlock that value in the hands of the people living in the slums?
Yes, we not only did that, we got title to all to the people that were also living in the agricultural sector, and because they came up with concrete problems, not problems that at the end were well exposed but you couldn't see the outset. So today, for example, if you take the case of Peru, I'd say that probably 90% of the urban sector is titled, and 80% would not be titled. But the issue is really the following one, which undid some of our work, if you want to, which is, are you going to give them title for what? Because the general idea is that a title in the libertarian Western sense of the word means the right to exclude. This belongs to me, so everybody else is excluded. I decide what I do, right? But as lawyers always say, a title is really a bundle of sticks. It not only tells you whether you can exclude, but it tells you how you can exclude and what you can do it. So, for example, I walk around. My life is composed. The other day I was able to take out my wallets. I've got about 27 cards. These cards are an expression of all the things I own and all the things I'm authorized to own. Right. So if I put on my credit card, I didn't bring it with me, and put it into an ATM, what I feed is information about the value of my property, or the amount of money I am ready to give in a short amount of time or in a long amount of time. Basically, if you look at what you have as titles, not only to your homes, your land, but to your whatever assets you have, and it's incredible how much assets one has that are even intellectual assets. Each of them is not only made up of identity, which is helpful because if you're ever going to buy, sell, merge, do whatever you have to do, you have to identify yourself, but is really basically a permit. In other words, if the person you're demonstrating your right to assets is a bank, what they want to know is if you're going to pay. So they're going to ask different things than somebody else who wants to know what are you going to do with the water, because you have to share from a common river or common lake, etc. And so the problem that if you want to that we've had is making everybody understand when push came to shove, that there are many functions that a title can have. And so the message there is this: you have to then work to make sure that people who are in charge of distributing titles, say just for land, for water, for your little business, for your little mining operation, or whatever it is, do not consider these things. They consider what they've got in mind. And so it is not generally a good idea, for what we've seen before, to deal with exclusively the people who are today the ones in charge of managing titles. You want to bring all those other people, that comes through the consultations, that make sure that the title brings all the bunch of sticks that you actually need so that it serves various functions. Functions are, as I said before, one function can be credit, right? The other function can be, we have got to settle a divorce. The other function can be, we have understood that every time, what good is a property to us, because every time we want to decide that on the land that we have got, if we are going to let a large mining company come in, and that potentially could overnight quadruple, quintuple the value of the land we're sitting on, because we now know how to get to the resources of the subsoil, resources here or there. The way we are organized at the level of the tribe means that every decision has got to go through a whole communal approach, a whole system of putting various things together but not in an atmosphere that is convivial or that gets to the results, but in a political atmosphere. And so the general idea is there are places where communities work. There are aspects where communities make a lot of sense. But what can I tell you? For example, I live here in a community in Peru, and I come from a place called Arequipa, but I like taking decisions together regarding roads, public infrastructure, etc. But whether I sell my house or not is nobody else's business. So you got to make sure that that all the aspects of property are there. What gives a property its value? For example, talk about land. Let's start talking about that. Is the fact that that land, the title to that land can travel, because you never know who's going to use it the best. What good is the fact that I've got land in the first line of buildings that has got the big window, show window, to make a sale? What I've got there is my ailing grandmother. Wouldn't I be interested to trade it with somebody who needs a window to display whatever wares they're saying, and where there's a lot of traffic noise, and have my grandmother go where there's no traffic noise and make a lot of money in the process? The advantage of property is that it moves. It should move, because its best economic use, the one that's going to give you wealth, depends on it being flexible. So the idea is, when you're talking about property, you are not talking about the physical object itself, but its value and what you can do with it. So you got to make sure that all those things are in place. And in an Anglo-Saxon society, in a European society, the people who take care of land are very specialized in one thing, and it's taken them 400 years of undoing the feudal system to make that land travel and things be where they are. In other words, for the French, you don't put the Eiffel Tower right in the middle of your home. You don't put the sewage right in the middle of the Chez Maxime's. That's taken 400 years. So our job is not to imitate what the Europeans did over 400 years, but rather to find out how in 2 years we get to what took them 400 years to do, because we can go. And that means that, and that's why I was talking about the consultation process, because the consultation process on TV with everybody around will understand that a great deal of the problems that have to do with how you can take property, which is sort of like Marx would have said, a tag that detaches itself from the physical object itself, is where a lot of the problems come. And the ideologies of the people trained to deal with the land, and what you really want to find out is what common people are saying, which can make a lot of sense. And your problem has very little to do with land, and it has a lot to do with laws and different parts, and that everybody would be in agreement with. I mean, there's got to be a reason, Dave. I mean, I know I'm getting off the track of property, if you want to, of property as one sees it for reform. But for example, we have seen with Peruvians that are squatting in Peru, that get violent in Peru, that say they don't want the law to be applied in Peru. The moment they go to the United States, they migrate, because things have gotten pretty terrible here, and they're in the United States, they use the law immediately. The first thing they want to do is to get inside the legal system, because it makes sense, to the point that the Pope, when he had his fight with Trump and he visited New York, Madison Garden, he said, how is it possible that there are 12 million people, many of them Latin American, of course, 12 million people are in this country and don't have a permit to be able to follow the law, and don't have a title? In other words, these very same people that at home don't want titles because white man's going to take it. When you get in the right political situation, everybody wants a title. Everybody wants a green card. So the first thing is to make sure they can be heard, and that the property issue gets out of the confines where it's too rigid to be able to do any change. It's a political thing.
Hernando, did you find that there was a kind of an innate appetite for property among all segments of the population? And once they were able to acquire property rights, did that change the way they interacted with what had been their house? Do they upgrade? Do they become involved in leveraging the property to start businesses and things of that nature?
Yes, I've got a colleague in front of me who remember that there's various groups that independent of us who made a study of the reforms we had done. There was a lady from a university, Gustavo. I don't remember what the university was. Erica Fields. And one of the things that there are various things that she had pointed out. I forget what the major was, but the one of the things that was crucial is that first of all, the amount of credits that were given around were very important, because you were able now to back up the request for money with something solid. I mean, basically, credit comes from Latin credere, I believe in you, because you got something to lose. Immediately that makes money flow. But what was her big finding, which was really interesting? Yeah, but we're there. I just remember now that there was one of the biggest benefits. Well, first of all, okay, let me say from memory while Gustavo looks at it. First of all, everybody started trading land. Nobody was exactly where they wanted to be, because it's you do things on the basis of a customary, and then once you do that, how do you move around? It wasn't around. Credit improved. You had addresses, therefore crime lessened, and it's automatic that it should lessen, because the very characteristic of a criminal is somebody who doesn't have an address. So you're able to find out where there aren't addresses. You're able to spot the criminals. You're able to you get a lot of information, if you want to, from that. When we went to other countries, and that's one of the ads I was showing you, for example, Japan, where we learned a lot from, and we had a Japanese president at a certain moment. When they started their reforms, induced by General MacArthur, who was the head of the occupying forces, and who wanted people to have property. The way you communicated then, Dave, was not through television. There wasn't television at that time. There wasn't the internet. What you had was posters. So 1946, here's a poster. And it tells the Japanese who are at the bottom. Here you have your, say, 50% of, no, at that time it must have been 80% of Japanese who lived in the feudal system, and we're told, okay, you now are in a feudal farm, etc. And of course, none of it belongs to you. And then they start saying, oh no, yes, within the feudal system, I get so many square meters. This has been traditionally my family home. This is where I keep my animals, but it's communal. Yeah, we are a community. But wait a second, you're telling me you got a right? Yeah, I got a right, but it's under communal law. So when before the system came around of saying how they were going to be titled, they went along with photographers, because it was the easiest way to get it. They pointed out to their parcel, they pointed out their shop, they pointed out their workplace, and with their family there, and one witness pointed to where the boundaries were. And that's the way Japan got titled, 1946. It's one of the richest countries in the world today. Then there were leaders, which were not basically the tribal chiefs or people around the tribal chiefs, that said, yeah, the real rules are this. So they went out and they got all the rules in 1 year. And then all of that was transmitted to the prefectures of Japan. And then all that went to supposedly Emperor Hirohito. And with that, Japan, what it did was, this is another poster. It told you, it went around, they said, we're destroying the feudal Meiji Restoration. regime that was there before. On the basis of now square consultations, we've got a new recording system that brings all of this new information inside, and the titles were against property. And then somebody said, but maybe we should do, maybe now what we have to really do is formal good maps. And the reply was, why do that? We already have a system in the last 500 years on the basis of what we already have in the maps they've already done. Let's do it. Maybe if you're in Japan today, where the precision required to get a map in place is extremely important, because just putting a waste paper basket there could cost you $100,000. Land is so valuable. This is good enough. That's why the first thing to do is find out what you have to do if you've got a population like Peru does that's living somewhere in the 19th century. Can't apply only 21st century solutions. Give them what they've got, let them understand it, let them put it in their own language. You'll be surprised how easy it is to pick it up. If you put an anthropologist, he might wait 30 years until he puts his thesis inside. It isn't a question of a thesis. It's a question of saying, how do things work? And on the basis of that, you simply streamline it. And you can computerize it much faster than, say, a European would. Let me explain. Since you're going to a place that is any place where the poor are, it's a place where there is no, what can you say, what do they call it? History of title. They just have whoever is there now. The result is we were able to computerize our whole system. When we went to Switzerland, which we had support, and we went to the office with somebody who had bought a property in Zurich, and they're very expensive there, and had bought a property, his neighbor's property, and the registrar said, okay, so what you're going to do now is absorb your neighbor's property. So here we've got the map. He took out the map, Swiss map, Zurich, one of the highest GNP per capitas in the world, the most fidgety people of Western Europe. He took out a razor blade to erase it, while we do it with a computer. Why? Because the Europeans have got such an amount of information on where that property came from over the last 500 years, right, that they can't put into computers. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do more rapidly. Well, so one of the things you've got to defend yourself from is getting somebody from the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Urban Development who says, no, we need a full place cadastre before we go. Oh, well, there goes the budget, right? We need a full this and we need a full that. So that's why I'm saying popular participation, not through political representatives, because they're a different sort of, they play a different function, just in terms of knowing who owns what, where and how much function they have, right? On the basis of complaints, because if you ask for ideas, that's another chapter. You want on the basis of complaints, what is it that they can't do, is a very important first step, and makes people understand that information about picking up information about what the situation in land or in any other assets is basically an inquest on what people value and what they want. Once you know what they value and what they want, you pass from being a culture to being a civilization.
Hernando, this has been absolutely fascinating. I think that what I'm taking away from this is the absolute need for consultation. We have to really talk to the people who are involved in this historic process. Secondly, there are so many resonances. You talk about the tribal chiefs in Peru and the involvement with land. We have that situation in South Africa as well. But at the bottom of it all, there is that exciting prospect of unlocking the wealth in the hands of ordinary people. And that is something that we South Africans need to tackle now. And we hope that one day we'll be able to say that we also have 90% of our homes with title deeds. We think that that would be a game changer for the country. But thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing your views on this really important topic.
I'm delighted, Dave. If I may just give one last phrase that may be useful, which I think we may have used before. It's Aristotle 2,400 years ago, where he established mathematically through writings of over 200 pages, equivalent to 200 pages, the following thing, that the potential of something is much bigger than the thing itself, always. So the important thing about the consultations is that people will tell you what they want to do with their land. So they're going to look at it as potential. And that potential can only be changed with property rights, because property rights is basically a document that allows you to reach your potential. And nobody can tell you that as much as the person who sees that he's got something, but he can't do it the same way, say, somebody who comes from an Black African tradition and he's looking at somebody with a white, he wants to do the same thing, but he can't see how to reach his potential. Once he focuses on property and the amount of rights he's got, he'll see that potential. And he'll see it his own way, and that will immediately allow him to understand that he's not talking about the earth. He's basically talking about the fact that it's got a value, and values are immaterial. So you've got to pick them with your head. Capital comes from that word, head, Latin, capita. You capture it with your head, the potential value. It's not something that you talk about it, and it's an interior process, and it worked extremely fast. And then, of course, there are other problems, but at least we've started a first step in the right direction, I think, Dave.
Well, thanks so much, Hernando, and we look forward to welcoming you in South Africa.
I'd be delighted. I've been there various times, very quickly, unfortunately, but I love the place. You've got a great country, known for its huge amount of wealth, and which we all admire and we hope to learn from, because you've set yourself on a very important agenda, which is how you bring a country that was split into 2, 3, 4 parts into one. You know that better than anybody else. Is a task we wish you well with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave.